I have 3 stories for you today. We only upload once a week, so if you enjoy the strange, dark and mysterious delivered in story format, you've come to the perfect place before we dive into those stories. Therefore, if you're interested in that, please sneak into the like button's refrigerator the next time you're at their house and swap out all of their vanilla ice cream for mashed potatoes. To ensure you don't miss any of our weekly uploads, please subscribe to our channel and enable all notifications. All right, let's begin the stories for today. 10 p.m. Chen Rongyu, a 23-year-old male, entered an internet cafe in New Taipei City, Taiwan on January 31st, 2012. A cashier would check you in and sell you drinks and snacks at the cafe's front counter. And then he could see all of these tables, these long rows of tables, with various computer stations at them behind the cashier. Additionally, there were already at least 30 people seated behind each of these machines, completely absorbed in whatever game or online activity they were performing. And when Chen entered, none of these individuals even raised their heads. No one was interested in Chen, really. However, Chen saw that as a kind of perk of being completely alone. While he sat down to play his game, Chen then approached the desk and made a payment for a while. He purchased a soda as well. He then went back and discovered an empty computer, sat down, and launched League of Legends, his favorite game, right away. The multiplayer online battle arena game, League of Legends, is incredibly well-liked worldwide, and Chen was quite serious about this game. He would frequently play League of Legends for 8 hours straight at an internet cafe in an attempt to level up and climb the rankings. Chen was therefore going to do that today. He thus locked in right away after the game booted up and started his first battle. Before long hours had passed and he still hadn't woken up. After a while, he ultimately got up a few times to grab a food and a refill of soda. However, he essentially played the game continuously throughout the night, only taking brief breaks to literally rest his head on the table and take a 15-minute power sleep before immediately getting back up and playing again. He's playing this game all night. By the afternoon of February 1st, Chen had been playing games almost constantly for 14 hours, which was a lot of time even for him. Now, however, he was unable to stop. He was doing well, but he was tired. He's had some of the best sessions in his life. At that same moment, he was in the midst of a fierce competition in which his team was on the verge of losing to this formidable opponent. Additionally, they could win if Chen could just lock in. Chen was able to avoid an attack because he was extremely focused, leaned forward, and had his hands flying across his keyboard and mouse. Then he prepared for the big blow. Just as he did, a problem arose. The cashier at this internet cafe had just completed serving another drink to a customer at around 9 o'clock in the evening. Then they turned to look outside, and she saw that no one else was there. This cashier's duties went beyond simply checking customers in and serving them drinks and snacks. Additionally, it was to maintain the cafe's cleanliness and, most importantly, to make rounds and eject patrons when their allotted time had passed, because many of these players would frequently become engrossed in their games, lose track of time, and essentially play for longer than they had paid for. The cashier then started going around the back after grabbing her clipboard, which contained all of the customer information, including how long each customer had paid for. Additionally, she had to essentially interact with everyone present to clarify that they were still expected to be there when usual. However, no one looked up at her when she entered the rear. Every single person at every terminal was completely absorbed in their game. Totally engrossed. She then started approaching them one by one, asking them whether they were doing okay. Have you paid for the time you spent? Will you be here a little while longer? Because they weren't paying any attention. Many of these guys would, look up at last and be completely surprised that she was even there next to them. But, she examined each monitor individually before reaching Chen. And when she reached Chen, Chen was so engrossed in this game that she said, "Hey, your time is up. You've spent a full day here, 8 or 9 or whatever it was you paid for it." Chen didn't even give her a glance. She could not even get Chen to acknowledge her. Really? He was totally absorbed in the game. Chen leaned back as the cashier finally said, "Hey," in a frustrated tone. She then gave him a shoulder tap, and the clerk shouted when he did, and she had a chance to see him. As it turned out, Chen's dream had come true up until this particular moment. 24 hours prior, he had arrived at this cafe and found himself completely alone. He was able to play his game alone in his own universe. In actuality, nobody had even glanced at him during his whole stay here, since they would have realized something was seriously amiss. When the cashier approached him and tapped on his shoulder, she realized something was off. This is what the cashier observed. The reason Chen is in full rigor mortis in this picture is that 9 hours prior, when he was engaged in a fierce battle with the opponent who was going to defeat Chen and his team, Chen became very excited and was on the verge of delivering the big blow that might have won the match. He was so excited, in fact, that Chen died of a heart attack, and no one paid any attention to him for the 9 hours following his death when he was still playing the game in the same position. He was dead, yet he just sat there, looking like he was completely alive, immersed in the game like everyone else. Because he is in rigor mortis, Chen's hands sort of jutted out in front of him up into the air, so she didn't realize he was dead until the cashier tapped him on the shoulder and he rocked backwards while still in his game stance. According to Chen's family, his deadly heart attack was most likely caused by pre-existing heart problems, your greatest self at this moment. Naturally, I begin to feel quite self-conscious around this time every spring, since I see all of my friends and family sharing their incredible lives on social media, appearing to be the greatest versions of themselves, and I don't think I'm doing enough to match it. Therefore, I don't find it surprising that according to statistics, anxiety does increase in the middle to late spring. Fortunately, BetterHelp, my sponsor, is here to support you, and their qualified therapists are available at this very moment. After just 6 weeks, most BetterHelp members report fewer feelings of anxiety. It's also simple to begin in as little as a few days. BetterHelp will match you with a therapist once you complete a questionnaire. Additionally, you are free to change therapists whenever you want until you discover one that works for you. BetterHelp is a reliable website with more than 7,000 ratings and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot. Instead of letting your anxiety control you, let BetterHelp help you manage it. To receive 10% off your first month of therapy, click the link in the description below or visit betterhelp.com/Mr. Balin. Well, let's get back to the stories. A 48-year-old man named Samuel Gomez was chatting with the concierge in the lobby of the Moxie Hotel in Portland, Oregon, on the afternoon of October 11, 2023. Earlier that morning, Samuel had taken a plane from Phoenix to Portland, where he was scheduled to present at a conference later that week. He was simply going to walk out and take in the sights for the time being, though he had thus requested some local recommendations from the concierge. Samuel thanked the concierge for recommending a few interesting local spots before leaving through the front door, and into the street. Samuel noticed a huge ruckus straight down the street as soon as he stepped outdoors. He then turned to face the direction and noticed a group of automobiles and people standing in what appeared to be a large circle surrounding whatever was going on there. People were honking and shooting something in the center of the circle with their phones, but Samuel was unable to identify what it was. Additionally, it seemed that at least one police officer was in his vehicle, sort of marshalling the situation and obstructing traffic. However, Samuel was really clueless about the wild scene that was taking place. Naturally, though being a human, he was intrigued. He was curious to see what was happening. Samuel then started down the street. He took out his phone, turned on his camera, and started shooting and snapping images as he went, and the clamor of horns, the shouting of people, and the general mayhem just grew louder as he approached whatever was happening here. And Samuel still didn't understand what the hell this was. He then just kept taking pictures and acting as a sort of spectator. And Samuel happened to turn his phone and point his camera toward the policeman when he went up close and was actually standing close to the one obstructing traffic. And he snapped a picture. When he did, he took this picture. The policeman is pointing his rifle straight at Samuel, as you can see. And the reason for that is because this person is not a police officer. Samuel simply believed he was a policeman. He observed a man in a car who seemed to be an undercover police officer in the right place at the right time, taking command and dealing with whatever it was as he looked down the road at this bizarre scene. In actuality, the man in the picture is Jeffrey Hammond, who was recently involved in a road rage incident. Additionally, he shot and killed Ryan Martin, a 47-year-old man. Samuel had come outside to that spectacle. Ryan Martin was shot and killed by Jeffrey Hammond. Everyone was responding to that. Unaware of this, Samuel was walking down the street when he unintentionally stood directly in front of the still, somewhat insane shooter who pointed his camera at him just as Jeffrey Hammond turned his gun and shot Samuel. Samuel was shot just seconds after this picture was taken. Fortunately, however, Samuel would live through the shooting. Jeffrey Hammond was taken into custody and accused of murder. To the best of our knowledge, he is presently incarcerated pending trial. On a rural farm in northern Venezuela, a young guy called Luis Hernandez was sitting inside a little stone house with a metal roof. On April 5, 2018, Luis painted, and this shanty had been his home and art studio for the past year or two. Additionally, it was nearly always a mess. All of his paint supplies were strewn around the floor, along with food scraps and dirty plates. However, everything of his artwork, his most valuable and exquisite possessions, was displayed on the walls. He mostly painted portraits with striking colors and a dramatic appearance. The face of a man he had painted was actually painted in red on one wall in the midst of his cabin in the middle of the floor when he was actually painting. The woman's face, which was all blue, with vivid red lips, was then visible on the left, on the opposite wall. Additionally, these paintings were so powerful that it seemed as though they were both staring at him as he was working. However, on this specific day, Luis put the strange notion that his paintings were observing him out of his head and concentrated solely on finishing this job while he sat in the center of a shanty working on it. You see, he was working on another lovely portrait when he took his paintbrush, dipped it in black ink, and applied the final touches. Luis sat back and absorbed everything when this photo was finished, and he couldn't help but feel a little sad. You see, this project was unlike any other he had ever worked on. It wasn't a pastime of his. He wasn't working for a living. He was using it as a coping mechanism for a major life catastrophe. Thus, Luis's lover, Lisandro Rosales Garcia, owned the remote property on which the shack where Luis lived and worked was located. Luis and Lisandro had first met almost a year prior, when Luis was experiencing extreme hardship and was living on the streets. However, Luis had been spotted by Lisandro, who offered to let him live in this cabin on his remote property. And Luis says, "Wow, yeah, I'd love to do that," as he has no other choice. He then moves into the hut, where he and Lisandro quickly develop a more romantic relationship, which made Luis very happy. He believed that Lisandro was the only one who genuinely understood him and encouraged his artistic endeavors. However, Lisandro had simply vanished 2 months prior. Luis had not received any information from the police who were investigating the matter. Luis was now coping with this significant void in his life in the only way he knew how, which was through his artistic endeavors. His most recent endeavor, which he recently completed, was a sort of homage to his boyfriend, who is no longer with him. However, Luis heard voices outside as he set down his brush and got up to look at his creation. Given how remote this property was, this was extremely exceptional. Luis and Lisandro would only interact with people here if they were invited after all. Moreover, Luis had not extended an invitation. However, others outside started beating on Luis's front door before he could even react to these strangers on his home. Luis then opened the door and saw all of these policemen waiting there. Luis's initial thought was that they must be present to provide him with some information on Lisandro's disappearance. However, these police officers failed to provide an update. Rather, they simply shoved past Luis and into the painting studio, where they started removing all of his paints and brushes. The last thing Luis had been working on, his homage to his lost boyfriend, was finally visible to one of the officers. When they peered down, the cop turned around, rushed outside and puked at seeing the painting. This is a photo of that homage. Now, this work of art appears completely unimpressive at first view. It looks like some kind of stained glass, with some red and blue flowers and green foliage. But you'll see how dreadful this image truly is when you think about the kinds of materials Luis utilized to create this specific work of art. And that's what made that cop throw up. Luis was more than just a painter, as would find out he was a serial killer as well. And he would paint all of his paintings using the blood ashes and other body parts of his victims after he had slain them. Actually, Luis and Lisandro were a happy couple at first. But after they got into a fight, in February 2018, Luis killed Lisandro and promptly started utilizing his body parts to make this homage to his boyfriend. Re-examining the tribute painting, you will see that all of the black is Lisandro's ashes and all of the crimson is Lisandro's blood. The remains of at least 6 victims would be discovered by police on that property overall. Additionally, they discovered proof that Luis was creating art with more than just their body parts. In addition, he was eating his victims. After being taken into custody, Luis fully confessed he is currently imprisoned in Venezuela. As far as we know, I sincerely appreciate you viewing. Please share your thoughts about today's episode in the comments section below. And don't forget that you may currently binge watch hundreds of our videos. However, if you're searching for my recommendation of a single worthwhile video, check it out right here, so watch it. Okay, till then, see you later.